Never stay in room 444. Chapter 1. The Warning. The taxi's windshield wipers fought against the relentless Tokyo rain as Marcus Chen pressed his face to the glass, watching the neon signs blur into watercolor streaks. The Yamakawa Hotel emerged from the downpour like something from another era, a traditional ryokan wedged between gleaming skyscrapers. Its wooden facade dark with age and moisture. "You sure this is the place?" the driver asked in broken English, eyeing the antiquated building. Marcus checked his phone. His flight had been delayed 6 hours, and every decent hotel was booked solid due to the Cherry Blossom Festival. This place had been his last resort, found through a sketchy booking site that promised authentic Japanese hospitality. The lobby smelled of incense and old wood. Behind the reception desk, an elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun bowed deeply. Her English was precise but heavily accented. "Chen-san, welcome. However, I must inform you we have only one room available." Marcus pulled out his credit card. "That's fine. I just need somewhere to sleep." The woman's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "Room 444. But sir, perhaps you would prefer to wait until tomorrow? Find accommodation elsewhere?" "Why? What's wrong with the room?" "The number 4. She made a soft sucking sound through her teeth. In Japanese, she means both 4 and death. This room, it has history. Marcus laughed, exhaustion making him giddy. "I don't believe in superstitions." The woman's dark eyes studied his face. "Many Western guests say this. Very few stay more than one night." She slid an ornate brass key across the polished wood. "Room 444, 4th floor. Please, be respectful of the spirits." As Marcus took the key, its metal felt ice cold against his palm, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he heard someone weeping in the distance. Chapter 2. The elevator creaked as it climbed past the 3rd floor, then shuddered to a halt. Marcus waited, but the doors remained closed. He pressed the button for the 4th floor again, and with a mechanical groan, the elevator lurched upward. The 4th floor hallway stretched into shadows, lit only by flickering overhead bulbs that cast dancing pools of yellow light. The carpet, once deep red, had faded to the color of dried blood. Traditional Japanese paintings lined the wall's demons with wild eyes and bared fangs, their faces twisted in eternal anguish. Room 444 sat at the far end of the corridor, its brass nameplate tarnished black. As Marcus approached, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. His breath formed small clouds in the suddenly frigid air. The key turned easily, too easily, as if the lock was eager to let him in. The room was larger than he'd expected, decorated in traditional Japanese style with tatami mats, paper screens, and a low table in the center. A futon had been laid out in the corner, crisp white sheets glowing in the dim light from a single floor lamp. Everything appeared normal, yet something felt profoundly wrong. Marcus set down his suitcase and immediately noticed the silence. In a city of 13 million people, the complete absence of sound was unnatural. No traffic, no voices from neighboring rooms, no hum of air conditioning, just a hollow quiet that pressed against his eardrums. He tried the television static. The phone line was dead. His cell phone showed no signal despite having full bars in the lobby. As he unpacked, the lamp flickered once, twice, then steadied. Marcus paused, a chill running down his spine. The silence had broken. Now he could hear something else, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere within the walls. Tap, tap, tap. The sound moved slowly along the wall behind the headboard, as if someone was walking inside the structure, knocking gently as they passed. Marcus pressed his ear to the wallpaper, but the tapping stopped immediately. He checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. Exhaustion weighed on him like a physical force, but sleep felt impossible in this oppressive atmosphere. He tried to read, but the words blurred together, and he found himself reading the same paragraph over and over. A soft whisper drifted through the room, so quiet he almost missed it. Japanese words, spoken in a woman's voice, lilting and mournful. He couldn't understand the language, but the tone was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. Marcus stood and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. The glass was fogged with condensation, though the room felt cold rather than humid. As he watched, letters began forming in the moisture, traced by an invisible finger. Juke. He didn't read Japanese, but something about the characters filled him with dread. They seemed to pulse with malevolent energy before slowly fading away. A door slammed somewhere in the building, the sound echoing through the walls. then another, and another. It was as if every room on the floor was being systematically checked, doors opening and closing in sequence, moving closer to room 444. The tapping resumed, more insistent now, accompanied by what sounded like fingernails scraping against wood. Marcus grabbed his phone to record the sound, but when he played it back, there was only silence. He decided to shower, hoping the hot water would calm his nerves. The bathroom was small and cramped, with a traditional Japanese soaking tub and a handheld shower head. As the water heated up, steam filled the space, and in the mirror above the sink, shapes began to emerge. Handprints, dozens of them, appearing in the condensation as if pressed from the other side of the glass. Small hands, a woman's hands, and among them, something else, symbols or characters that looked like they'd been clawed into the surface. Marcus spun around, but the bathroom was empty. When he turned back to the mirror, the handprints were gone. The shower offered no relief. The water ran ice cold, despite the handle being turned to its hottest setting, and halfway through washing his hair, he heard singing a traditional Japanese lullaby that seemed to come from the drain itself, bubbling up with the water. He dressed quickly and returned to the main room, where the temperature had dropped even further. His breath came in visible puffs, and frost was forming on the inside of the windows. The whispers had grown louder, multiplying into a chorus of voices, men, women, children, all speaking in urgent, overlapping Japanese. At exactly 3:33 a.m., everything stopped. The whispers cut off mid-syllable. The tapping ceased. Even his own breathing seemed to pause. In that moment of absolute silence, Marcus became aware of a presence in the room with him, something standing just beyond his peripheral vision. He turned slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. There, in the corner where the shadows were deepest, stood the silhouette of a woman. She was translucent, like smoke, but he could make out long black hair hanging over her face and a white burial kimono that seemed to glow with its own pale light. She wasn't moving, just standing there, watching him. Marcus blinked, and she was gone. He spent the rest of the night sitting upright on the futon, fully dressed, staring at the corner where the figure had appeared. Every shadow seemed to hide movement, every small sound made him flinch. By dawn, his hands were shaking uncontrollably, and dark circles had formed under his eyes. As the first grey light of morning crept through the windows, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. The temperature returned to normal, and the familiar sounds of the waking city filtered through the glass. Marcus felt like he was emerging from a nightmare. But as he gathered his things to check out, he found something that made his blood run cold. On the low table in the center of the room, where nothing had been before, sat a single white chrysanthemum, the flower used in Japanese funeral ceremonies. It was still wet with morning dew, though the windows had remained closed all night. Chapter 3. Marcus stood in the hotel lobby, suitcase in hand, his checkout aborted. The elderly receptionist watched him with knowing eyes. "The trains are not running, Chen-san. There was an incident on the tracks, a suicide, very common at this time of year." She bowed apologetically. "All flights are grounded due to the typhoon warning. I am afraid you must stay another night." The flower from room 44 burned in his memory like a brand. "Isn't there anywhere else I can go? I have called every hotel in the district. The festival. The weather." She spread her hands helplessly. "Room 444 is still available." The brass key felt heavier this time, as if it had absorbed the weight of the previous night's terror. As Marcus ascended to the 4th floor, the familiar dread settled over him like a funeral shroud. The hallway seemed longer than before, stretching endlessly toward the cursed room. The paintings on the walls had changed, or perhaps he was noticing details he'd missed. The demon's eyes seemed to track his movement, and their mouths appeared to be moving silently, as if whispering warnings he couldn't hear. Inside room 444, the white chrysanthemum was gone, but its sickly sweet scent lingered in the air. Marcus had barely set down his suitcase when the activity began. No waiting for the deep hours of the night this time. The temperature plummeted immediately, his breath visible in the suddenly Arctic air. Ice crystals began forming on the paper screens, creating intricate patterns that looked like reaching hands and screaming faces. The whispers started as a low hum, building gradually into distinct voices, speaking in rapid, urgent Japanese. Marcus pulled out his phone and activated the translation app, holding it toward the sounds. The screen flickered, displaying fragments. "Doesn't belong here. Still warm. Join us in the darkness." A shadow passed across the window, far too large and moving far too quickly to be cast by anything natural. Marcus approached the glass cautiously and peered out into the gathering dusk. 4 stories below, the hotel's courtyard was empty, except for a traditional stone well in the center, its opening covered by a heavy wooden lid. As he watched, the lid began to move. It slid aside with agonizing slowness, revealing a black hole that seemed to absorb light. From its depths came a sound like rushing water mixed with moaning voices, and something pale and serpentine began to emerge a woman's arm, impossibly long, reaching up toward his window. Marcus stumbled backward, and when he looked again, the courtyard was empty. The well's lid was firmly in place. Behind him, the room had transformed. The tatami mats were now soaked with water that hadn't been there moments before. It wasn't clean water, it was dark and foul-smelling, with things floating in it that looked disturbingly like hair and fingernails. The liquid seemed to be seeping up from beneath the floor, spreading outward in a widening pool. In the center of the room, the low table had overturned itself. Carved into its wooden surface, as if burned there by invisible hands, were 4 Japanese characters. Marcus's translation app identified them: Sus, death, 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 death. The whispers had become screams now, a cacophony of anguish that seemed to come from inside his own skull. Marcus pressed his hands to his ears, but the sound only grew louder, more insistent. Among the chaos of voices, he began to pick out individual words in English. Help us. So cold. Can't leave. He made us stay. The last phrase sent a chill deeper than the supernatural cold. He made us stay. Marcus repeated the words aloud, and the screaming abruptly stopped. In the sudden silence, he heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, approaching room 444. They stopped directly outside his door. The brass handle began to turn with a slow, grinding squeal. Marcus backed against the far wall, his heart racing. The door swung open with a bang, revealing the empty hallway beyond. But the doorway wasn't empty. It was filled with figures, translucent and glowing with pale light. Men and women in various stages of dress and undress, some in business suits, others in nightgowns, a few in the white burial kimono of the dead. They began to file into the room, moving with the jerky, unnatural gait of marionettes. Their faces were uniformly grey and drawn, eyes black holes in their skull-like features. As they entered, the temperature dropped even further, and Marcus's breath began to crystallize and fall to the floor like snow. The spirits arranged themselves in a circle around him, their mouths moving in unison but producing no sound. Behind them came something else, a figure in a dark western suit, his face obscured by shadow. Unlike the others, this one moved with purpose and malevolent intelligence. When the shadow figure spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. You should not have come here, outsider. This room, it belongs to them now. To us. Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What do you want? What we have always wanted, what we have been denied. The figure stepped closer, and Marcus caught a glimpse of his face, or what remained of it. The flesh was grey and rotting, hanging in strips from the bone beneath. Peace, rest, an end to the eternal watch. The ghostly figures began to move closer, their arms reaching out toward Marcus, with skeletal fingers that seemed to stretch and extend beyond their natural length. Where they touched him, his skin burned with cold, leaving pale marks that looked like fingerprints. 47 years, the shadow figure continued, his voice growing stronger, more substantial. 47 years since the last one joined us. We grow, lonely, hungry. The room demands tribute. Marcus tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey him. The cold had penetrated so deeply that his muscles had begun to seize up. Ice was forming in his hair, on his eyelashes, in his lungs with each labored breath. The spirits pressed closer, their mouths opening to reveal rows of sharp, blackened teeth. Their whispers had become a roar, speaking in dozens of languages. Join us. Stay with us. Never leave room 444. Just as their fingers closed around his arms, dawn broke outside the window. The first ray of sunlight cut through the room like a blade, and the spirits recoiled with shrieks of pain and fury. They dissolved like smoke, leaving only their echoing voices and the lingering scent of decay. Marcus collapsed to his knees on the wet tatami mats, gasping and shaking. His arms were covered in pale fingerprints that burned like frostbite, and when he looked in the bathroom mirror, his hair had gone completely white at the temples. He knew with absolute certainty that he would not survive another night in room 444. Chapter 4. By evening, Marcus had discovered the horrifying truth. Leaving was not an option. Every exit from the hotel led him back to the lobby. The front door opened onto the street, but after walking for what felt like hours through the Tokyo rain, he would find himself standing once again at the Yamakawa Hotel's entrance. The elevator, the stairs, even the fire escape, all paths led inexorably back to room 444. The elderly receptionist watched his increasingly frantic attempts with pitying eyes. "Chen-san," she said gently as he burst through the lobby doors for the 6th time, "you cannot leave until you understand, until you make peace with what happened here." "What are you talking about?" Marcus's voice cracked with exhaustion and terror. "What happened?" She gestured toward an ornate wooden cabinet behind the reception desk. Inside, Marcus could see yellowed newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs. "Would you like to know about Mr. Yamamoto, the man who built this hotel in 1978? Marcus nodded, though dread pooled in his stomach like acid. Kenji Yamamoto was a war profiteer who made his fortune in terrible ways. When he built this hotel, he deliberately chose room 444. He said the number would drive away superstitious Japanese guests, keeping the room available for wealthy foreigners who would pay premium rates. She pulled out a photograph of a stern-faced man in a dark suit, the same figure Marcus had seen in the room. But Mr. Yamamoto had appetites. Foreign visitors who stayed in room 444 began to disappear. The police found evidence, but Yamamoto had powerful friends. The investigation was buried. Marcus felt sick. How many? 47. Over the course of 15 years. Businessmen, tourists, travelers like yourself. Always alone, always in room 444. Yamamoto would drug their tea, and then… She shuddered. Their bodies were dropped down the old well in the courtyard. When guests complained about strange noises or sightings, he would tell them it was just their imagination, typical foreign skepticism of Japanese ghost stories. What happened to him? In 1993, a young American woman fought back. Sarah Morrison was her name. She managed to escape his first attempt, but she was trapped in the hotel just as you are now. That night, she confronted him in room 444. The old woman's voice dropped to a whisper. She killed him with a shard from the broken tea service, drove it through his throat. Marcus remembered the shadow figure's rotting face, the gaping wound where his throat should have been. But Sarah, she could not live with what she had done, what she had seen. She hanged herself from the ceiling beam in room 444 that same night. Her spirit joined the others, and Yamamoto's ghost became their jailer, trapping them in endless torment. The brass key burned in Marcus's pocket. How do I break the cycle? You must face him, Chen-san. You must find a way to free the trapped souls. Only then will the room release its hold on you. Night fell like a curtain as Marcus climbed to the 4th floor for what he knew would be the final time. The hallway was lined with spirits, now dozens of translucent figures watching his approach with hollow, desperate eyes. They reached out as he passed, their ghostly fingers brushing against him like ice-cold wind. Room 444's door stood open, waiting. Inside, the scene was chaos. Furniture floated through the air in slow circles. Walls bled with dark stains that formed and reformed into the shapes of screaming faces, and the temperature was so cold that ice covered every surface. In the center of it all stood Yamamoto's spirit, more solid and substantial than Marcus had seen him before, his rotting face split by a hideous grin. "Welcome back, outsider. Ready to join my collection?" The 47 spirits of his victims surrounded them, their forms flickering like dying candles. Among them, Marcus spotted a young woman in 1990s clothing, Sarah Morrison. Her neck bent at an unnatural angle, her eyes filled with regret and rage. "You don't control them anymore," Marcus said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "They're stronger than you now." Yamamoto laughed. "A sound like breaking glass. They are mine forever, just as you will be." But Marcus had noticed something the ghost had not. Sarah Morrison was moving closer, her hands raised and beginning to glow with pale fire. Behind her, the other spirits were doing the same, their forms becoming brighter, more substantial. "You're wrong," Marcus continued, backing toward the window. "They stayed because they were afraid, because they were alone. But they're not alone anymore." The spirits erupted into motion, their combined fury finally breaking free after decades of imprisonment. Sarah Morrison reached Yamamoto first, her burning hand closing around his throat. The other victims followed, 47 souls united in their desire for justice and freedom. Yamamoto's screams shook the building as the spirits tore at him with ethereal claws and teeth. His form began to disintegrate, pieces of his ghostly essence dissolving into nothingness. "You cannot destroy me," he shrieked. "I built this place. I own it." "You own nothing." Sarah Morrison spoke for the first time, her voice clear and strong. "Your time is over." With a final, earth-shaking wail, Yamamoto's spirit imploded into a point of absolute darkness before vanishing entirely. The room shuddered, the floating furniture crashed to the floor, and the temperature began to return to normal. The spirits of the victims turned to Marcus, their faces peaceful for the first time in decades. One by one, they bowed deeply before fading into points of warm light that drifted upward through the ceiling. Sarah Morrison was the last to go. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she too dissolved into golden radiance and was gone. Marcus stood alone in room 444, which was now just an ordinary hotel room. Tatami mats, clean and dry, paper screens intact, the oppressive atmosphere completely lifted. He walked to the window and looked down at the courtyard. The old well was gone, replaced by a beautiful garden with 48 white chrysanthemums planted in a perfect circle, one for each of the victims and one for their tormentor. As dawn broke over Tokyo, Marcus finally left room 444, carrying its key downstairs to the reception desk. The elderly woman was gone, replaced by a young clerk who looked confused when Marcus tried to explain about the night's events. "Room 444, sir. I'm sorry, but this hotel only has 3 floors. There is no room 444. Marcus looked at the brass key in his hand, but it was already beginning to fade, becoming translucent like the spirits themselves. By the time he reached the street, it had vanished entirely. He never found the Yamakawa Hotel again, though he searched for it many times in the years that followed. But sometimes, on rainy Tokyo nights, Marcus would catch a glimpse of an old wooden building wedged between skyscrapers, and he would see 48 points of light glowing softly in its windows, spirits finally at rest, watching over the city they had been forced to leave behind. The only physical reminder of his experience was a small white scar on his forearm, shaped exactly like a fingerprint, that never quite faded away.